Alrighty, everybody. Today we have a very special guest in the classroom. He's one of the most beloved teachers in Australia, loved by the Australian public and by teachers and students alike. Eddie Wu, welcome to the classroom.
Thanks so much for having me, Kat.
Such an honor to have you here.
No, pleasure's all mine.
So I want to start with how you even got into teaching, because you've been teaching for more than 16 years now. And so how did you get into it? And more importantly, why are you still in the profession?
Fantastic question. I feel as though I was in that very thankful but small group of people who were able to work out relatively early that I had a career progression that I was like, this is the direction that I want to go in. I remember going to school with a lot of people who, frankly, had so much brains, they didn't know what to do with it, right? And they weren't called ATARs back then, but they got marks at the end of school that were literally like, the world's your oyster, do whatever you like. And a lot of them, and I still talk to students who feel this now, they thought, oh man, I don't want to waste this super high mark and maybe I'll go and do X. Whether or not that was actually a really good fit for their personality and what they were driven to pursue. It was probably around year 10 for me. So I was like 15, 16 years old. And it occurred to me that I love helping other people learn things. And I have some modicum of skill with it. Like I had friends who would come to me during English class and they'd say, explain this play to me. Like, what's this character about? And I would tell them and they'd be like, that makes sense. And then they would go and get better marks in their essay than I did. But they'd always come back to me. I'm like, you guys are better at English than me. Like the exam marks prove it. But it was something, I guess, about the way that I verbally processed or tried to explain a concept. And that's something which I feel very privileged that I've been able to continue growing in. And of course, I had some fantastic teachers too, who were inspirations to me. And they showed me the incredible difference, the impact that an educator can make on a young person's life. And I thought that would be an amazing thing if I got to have that same opportunity.
Did your parents ever pressure you into the Asian 5?
The short answer is yes, but I went into the course that I wanted with a remarkably small amount of opposition. I mean, I had an older brother and sister who went into fairly successful careers, and then as the third of three and one who had access to all these educational opportunities, I'd be lying if I said there wasn't definitely some disappointment in the air when I said, I think I want to become a teacher. It's not the profession that pays the best or has the most status, the highest status. So there was definitely kind of a, really, are you sure you want to do this? But credit to them. Like I have met and encountered and like interacted with so many migrants who've come to this country. Education is a gateway for them to a life of prosperity, security. I totally get it. And as a parent myself, looking at my own children who are now getting on and thinking about the decisions they're going to make, I understand that my parents just wanted the best for me, right? But I feel very thankful that not just to me, but to my brother and sister as well, they said, okay, we think this might be the best decision, but it is your decision and you have to live with that. And I do remember my dad saying, look, whatever it is that you do, be really good at it. Apply yourself to that. And that should be true of you, whatever sphere or direction that you go into.
I think that goes for a lot of teachers in our field today. They're just trying to do the best for their students as well, in and amongst all of these constraints, complex workloads, increasing demands, precarious conditions. How have you been able to grow and sustain your expertise as you've been working in those conditions?
It's interesting because that question actually is part of an answer to the question I forgot to answer before, which is like, why am I still in this after this huge amount of time? And for me, the reason why I'm still in teaching is because, number one, so many of the things that drove and motivated me early on about becoming a teacher, being able to change the lives of young people, not only do they remain true, and so that original motivation is still valid, in fact, those things were more true than 18-year-old me could ever have comprehended. I'm not just a teacher of a subject, I'm a teacher of students, as all of us in the profession are. And so when I think about what's the reason why I'm an educator, it's not just so that I can instill knowledge and develop skills in my students. I get to play one small part in the role of shaping them as human beings. And me as a, you know, early career teacher just learned more and more about the opportunities and the privilege of being able to do that. And so then coming back to your other question, how I've developed and expanded, I feel as though I have had the privilege of learning from so many experienced expert educators who many of whom took me under their wing without I didn't earn that. They just kind of looked at me and maybe out of pity, they looked like, you have no idea what you're doing. You need help, buddy, right? I did teach for a significant amount of time early in my career at the school that I attended as a student. So I think part of them were like, oh, look, little Eddie's all grown up. He definitely still needs some help though. So it's through mentors, people who've coached me, through leaders who have taken it upon themselves to develop and cultivate me. And then I think the second piece of the puzzle is being able to integrate myself into a community of other teachers, both, locally here in New South Wales, around Australia, even around the world. Technology and social media have a lot of things to answer for, but what an incredible avenue they provide to help us connect with like-minded colleagues and not so like-minded colleagues who can challenge the way that we think. And then I think the third thing is that there's probably like 4, 5, 6, however many, right? But it's that there's this whole world of research and evidence out there that I remember reading when I was at uni and not fully comprehending at all. I think because I didn't have the experience, I hadn't gotten out into schools and truly inhabited the problems that people have been trying to solve as they've written all of these different academic works and frameworks and things like that. And so being able to marry all those theories and ideas and concepts with what I'm encountering in practice and what I see out in schools, and then try to fit those together and put them into a coherent way of doing things. Those are the ways that I've found have been helpful for me to grow as an educator.
I love that. And I want to dive a bit more into the whole research and evidence aspect and marrying that together with your industry knowledge and your currency in maths as well. So a lot of the research and the literature shows that maths anxiety is a common thing, especially for students and young girls in education. And so even for teachers themselves, thinking about maths within their subject areas or numeracy as a skill can be very daunting and difficult. And so from your perspective, how do you see teachers become more empowered to reconcile those deficit kind of approaches of, hey, I'm an English and humanities teacher, maths isn't my thing. I'm not really sure where to start with that. Can you speak into that from what you've understood?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, Kat, what you're making me think of is this framework for teacher practice that I first encountered years ago. It's decades old now, from Clark and Peterson. And they talked about what are the factors affecting what people do in the classroom and why they teach in a certain way, ask their students to do certain activities. And they said that the 3 main immediate factors are knowledge, which makes sense because if you don't know how to do something, you won't do it. Intent, like what are you motivated to do? What do you want for your students? And then attitudes, beliefs, and convictions about what's important and what's true and what's effective, right? So coming back to what you asked specifically, so when we think about numeracy and mathematical literacy across all our different key learning areas, you can see all 3 of those at work, both positively and negatively, right? I know there are lots of, not just educators, people in the general population who they interact with and use mathematics all the time, but it's hidden from their own view. I've met accountants and musicians and people in hospitality, all of whom would articulate, no, I'm not a maths person. I don't really use maths much in my job. But actually, if you just dig beneath the surface just a little bit, it's there. It's not even doing a very good job hiding, frankly. So being able to say, okay, I know that there is maths in what I do. And in fact, I'm quite good at using that particular maths that comes up in my sphere. I was just earlier this week, I was observing an economics lesson from one of the teachers in my school. And he said to me, help me work out how I'm going to explain marginal rates of distribution to my students. And I'm not an economist. I wished I'd actually studied a lot more of it when I was at uni and at school. So I'm coming from the outside, not knowing what all of these terms mean. But the two of us, my colleague and I, we could come together and build each other's knowledge of how our content areas overlap and interrelate. Then there's the intention question. And I do think that for the most part, it's a common phenomenon that most of us don't really want to get outside of our comfort zone. That's why it's called a comfort zone, right? It feels challenging and uncomfortable, difficult to try and wrap our head around a thing that is outside of the subject area that we, if we're a secondary, chose to go and study. Of course, in a primary context, if we're taking a generalist approach, that's even more challenging because you have to do that. You have a responsibility to do that. Whether you liked maths or science or English, these are things you have a responsibility to put time into. And so I know that's a huge challenge with a lot of the primary educators that I work with, and I love being able to try and support them through that. And then the last thing that they mentioned, attitudes and beliefs. I guess for me, trying to tackle this idea that do you believe actually that a deeper and a better and a richer understanding of the mathematics that's in your subject? Like, I'm not asking you to go dig down deep into some esoteric, weird concept. You're like, oh, this is stuff I forgot about at school. Everyone has their niche, but I'm convinced that mathematics is found everywhere and it's for everyone. It enriches and expands our ability to understand and navigate the world if we can lay our hands on these tools. Do we believe that? And I can understand why a lot of people from outside of the mathematics cafe wouldn't believe that. They haven't been given much of a reason to in the educational journey that they've had. So I view that as part of the work that I do in schools.
I think that's just mind-blowing.